Hello and welcome to Donington Park for the Dunlop Great and British Motorsport Festival package. A whole host of racing action, including the likes of the Mini Challenge, the Dunlop Sport Max Production Cup, with almost near standard production specification saloon cars that we'll see racing, and a whole host of radical action by virtue of the Radical UK Cup. And to start with, the Radical Club Cup, which is now just making its way onto the grid. The man that sits there on pole position is the current reigning champion, the current championship leader, Jonathan Wright. Alongside him is Colin Miller, both of them in the 1500cc Suzuki engined Radical PR6s. There's a gap on the inside of row 2 where we should have Gary Kane, therefore number 24 Paul Steele lines up on his own on that second row of the grid. The lights go out, away they go. A great start from both front row men. Keep your eye also from Darren Luke. He had problems in yesterday's race and therefore he starts towards the very rear of the grid, and he's very much one to watch out for as he makes his way up through the order. They head up towards Redgate Corner for the first time. It looks so everybody has just about safely made it through. There's a spin further down through the field. That's Tony Maisie. He had a spin on his first lap at Rockingham in the first few rounds of the series. He's had a spin here at Donington on his first lap as well, down towards the old hairpin for the first time. The front 2 or 3 stringing themselves out. Further back it looked as though there was a little bit of contact as well, one of those being Darren Luke, who is trying to thread his way as quickly as possible up through the order. Onto McLean's for the first time. Jonathan Wright being pressed very hard indeed by the Irishman Colin Miller. There goes Steve Burgess. He's maintained his position relative to where he was on the grid. He's in 5th place currently as they head up towards the blind entry double apex right-hander at Coppice Corner. Down the exhibition straight, of course, which no longer has the Dunlop Bridge over it. Very unusual to see that straight without the Dunlop Bridge nowadays. We're just so used to it. And in towards the S's and onto the Grand Prix loop for the first time. We ride on board with our camera car, Simon Fish. As he breaks up the inside comes Darren Anley and gains a place on him. You can hear the Suzuki 1500cc engine that powers the SR3 Radical working very hard indeed in the hands of Simon Fish. Well, Jonathan Wright, our race leader, as yet hasn't managed to break away from Colin Miller. They were separated in yesterday's race by not a great deal. And here we are today at Donington Park. And it looks as though the script is broadly the same. Locked brakes from Simon Tilling, number 23, as up the inside dives our camera car Simon Fish and gains a place. And now Colin Miller is starting to reel in the leader of the race. They head through Redgate Corner as we ride on board once more with Simon Fish. Also keep your eye on the progress of Darren Luke from what was 29th position on the grid. He's certainly likely to bring himself up towards the top 10. Whether he can, in this 20-minute race, get himself any further up through the field remains to be seen. Well, it looks as though he is going to come further up through the field. That is Darren Luke there, now pressing our camera car. Number 7, Darren Luke, has managed to get himself inside the top 8. He raises the dust on the exit of the old hairpin, so hard is he charging. And as we ride with Simon Fish up towards McLean's Corner, through the right-hander he goes. Up the inside comes Simon Tilling. You can now just about see Darren Luke in the mirrors as they head up towards Coppice Corner. I think Darren Luke's through yet. He gains another place again. So Darren Luke is working very hard indeed at the wheel of his Radical PR6. Once more, locked brakes from Simon Tilling. He's lost a place also to the fast-charging Darren Luke. Jonathan Wright still leading. Colin Miller, Paul Steele and John Paul Ivy, car number 29, just coming through shot now. He's in 4th place. Steve Burgess, Bill Henderson, Darren Anley, and then Darren Luke, who's now inside the top 8. A very full and varied grid of Radicals make their way round the Donington Park circuit. Nigel Place dives up the inside of Paul McLaughlin. Place gained by Nigel Place there. So as the leaders make their way down through the bottom section of the circuit, progress, albeit for the moment, briefly halted by Darren Luke. Here comes Steve Burgess still occupying that 5th position, the light blue number 12 car, trying, if he can at all, to close on John Paul Ivy ahead of him. However, he's also got to watch his mirrors behind him because he doesn't have that much of an advantage between himself and Bill Henderson. Race leaders down in towards the Melbourne hairpin. There is the car that's in 3rd place. That's Paul Steele. You can see relative to the 2 ahead of him, he's not that far behind. They'll climb up towards the completion of the lap once more. And as Simon Fish makes his way into the braking area for the very tight right-hander at the very bottom of the Melbourne loop, trying to keep the back end of the car in check as he accelerates up towards Goddard's. And he's being now pressurised and harried very much by Richard Stables, the number 95 car. He's very much closed on our camera car. Here comes Darren Luke once more, trying to gain another place on Bill Henderson. Up the inside he goes. He's almost brought himself up inside the top 6. In fact, he is now inside the top 6 from 29th position on the grid, Darren Luke. You can see Steve Burgess in that light blue car, not that far ahead. And if Darren Luke can continue to press on, he may well be destined for the podium in this one. Down towards the old hairpin goes Steve Burgess, followed very closely thereafter by Darren Luke. And then under the Starkeys Bridge and up towards McLean's Corner, with Darren Luke closing all of the time. The next car that Darren Luke will want to try and get his way past once he's dispensed with Steve Burgess is that of John Paul Ivy, as they now head up towards Coppice Corner. And he's made it through. Darren Luke has made it through, gained the place. He's now up into 5th position. Let's not forget our race leader, Jonathan Wright, having won yesterday's race, is at the moment at the front of the pack in this one. Darren Luke is whom we're concentrating on. A great drive so far from not quite the very back of the grid. 31 cars having started this race. Darren Luke, 29th position on the grid, just shows what great progress he's made. He's now closing on John Paul Ivy ahead as they come up towards Redgate Corner. Darren Luke jinks out briefly to the right-hand side. Have a quick look up the inside just to show the nose of the car. John Paul Ivy and Darren Luke both in the 1500cc Suzuki-powered PowerTech engined Radical PR6. And Darren Luke, for the moment, not quite able to find his way through. Out at the old hairpin once more. John Paul Ivy will very much be watching his mirrors as Darren Luke closes on him all of the time. And as they now exit McLean's Garrett, Darren Luke getting very close indeed. Darren Luke is up the inside. He's got the inside line when they get to the right-hand corner. Through he goes. Another place gained by Darren Luke. Paul Steele comes through now to complete a lap. He is still sitting there in 3rd place currently. But Darren Luke will, if at all possible, and it looks as though that may well be Paul Steele coming into the pits. There's a problem for Paul Steele. Into the pits he comes. That is therefore going to hand 3rd position to Darren Luke. Paul Steele makes his way down the pit lane. The mechanic's ready to greet the car. Not entirely sure what the problem is, but either way, it's promoted Darren Luke yet another place. John Paul Ivy behind him. So Darren Luke may have gained the position, but he hasn't as yet been able to pull away from John Paul Ivy, who still sits there in 4th place and has aspirations of retaking the final podium place, if at all possible. Up towards McLean's once more. Steve Burgess is there in 5th place, that light blue car just at the very back of the shot. And now Jonathan Wright making his way through the chicane, just passing one of the slower Club Sport class cars. That's number 11, Ian Charles, in the original 1100cc, 185 brake horsepower Kawasaki engine cars. Jonathan Wright makes his way once more through the Melbourne hairpin, having already secured 5 victories so far this season. Into the pits again for one of the cars, so problems continuing for some of the competitors as we head towards the closing stages of the race now. Looks as though it's Paul Steele that's only now just making his way back out of the pits. So time lost for Paul Steele, and significant amounts of it. So much so that the race leader goes through and puts him yet another lap down. Through goes Jonathan Wright once more. Paul Steele will have to therefore concentrate his attentions on the next rounds of this championship, which are at Castlecombe in Wiltshire. And here's a battle further down through the field. Paul McLaughlin having a fairly entertaining battle with Barry Marks, both of them in the Radical SR3 derivative. Up towards Goddard, the two of them go. Simon Fish also making his way through some of the back markers as well. He currently sits there inside the top 8 and is having a very good race indeed. Well, somebody's slowing coming down over the start-finish line towards the very end of the race. That's Ian Charles. We saw him earlier on being lapped by the race leader. The race leader, Jonathan Wright, now on his final lap of the race as he heads round through the Melbourne hairpin. He'll accelerate up the hill towards Goddard's Corner, and very shortly will be greeted by the checkered flag for the 6th time out of 6 so far this season in the Radical Clubman's Cup. Through he comes. Jonathan Wright claims his 6th victory on the trot in the Radical UK Cup. Somebody slowing towards the start-finish line there was Mark Crawford, who pulls off just after the checkered flag. It is going to be Colin Miller who comes through in 2nd position. What about that charge from the very back of the field from Darren Luke? He comes through in 3rd. Here's Simon Fish in the camera car, chasing down Darren Anley towards the very latter sections of the race. Simon Fish in 8th place, Darren Anley in 7th place. They head up towards the final corner. I don't think Simon Fish is quite close enough to do a lot about stealing 7th place away from Darren Anley, and therefore, as he accelerates towards the line, it is a top 8 finish for Simon Fish at the wheel of our camera car. So, the results as follows. Jonathan Wright secures his 6th victory of the season in the Radical Club Cup. Colin Miller was second, with Darren Luke, that charge from the back, in third. John Paul Ivy, Steve Burgess and Simon Tilling complete the top 6.
Well, fantastic. Another convincing win. Was this just another day at the office for you?
Yeah, another day at the office. The year's been absolutely fantastic. As follow on from last year, fingers crossed that we can carry on and drive as well as he has been, yeah.
Was there at any point any troubles that you came across, or was it really just you went for it, it was an easy win?
The only problem I had was I lost the rev counter on lap 2. And I got a bit of a gap on Colin, about 7 seconds. I started to rest a little bit, and I got trouble with some back markers, and he started to close up to 2 seconds. I knew how to pull my finger out again and get on the pace again, and just managed to open up that gap again. But yeah, it was reasonably comfortable.
So you think the title is yours again?
I wouldn't like to say that yet. It's a long way to go yet, but fingers crossed.
So Jonathan Wright leading the championship and running away with the tuned class, with Steve Burgess leading Super Sports, Mark Boot leading the Club Sport class, and Rachel Davis leads the Bi-Duros.